The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Hump day! Does anybody say that anymore? I guess it ran its course. That's a pretty good ad by Geico. They do really good ads. But yeah, that's old stuff. Nobody says that anymore on a Wednesday, but it is a Wednesday, and there are some things to get into today. It is the 35th anniversary of the launching of a story that has really dominated sports radio over the last 30 years anyway, especially in the dead time of the year. Pete Rose, Hall of Fame. And it kind of ignited today with the first meeting that Rose had with the then commissioner, Peter Ueberroth, as he was questioning some allegations of gambling, which, of course, Rose denied, even though he's a degenerate gambler. And him being out of the Hall of Fame has probably made him a much bigger figure than if he was in the Hall of Fame. But that has been a long and winding road since this day in 1989. We'll get to that in the next hour. Also, Davey Martinez talking at spring training yesterday. It's kind of an ancient notion, but it's base running. And do teams really concentrate on that anymore with the way the home run is valued, that you have a leadoff hitter for the Phillies who made the World Series with Kyle Schwarber hitting, about 203, 204, but he hit 40-some bombs. And that's the way the game is played today. So Davey talking about that yesterday at spring training. We'll get to that later this hour. And another one of those lengthy interviews that I've enjoyed so much that have resurfaced. This one was Sugar Ray Leonard, who's a local, grew up in Palmer Park, Maryland, and for many years lived in Potomac. He's been in Los Angeles, I think, a long time. But while he was in the prime of his fighting career, he trained here, lived in Potomac, and was the pride of D.C., somebody who accomplished a hell of a lot in the ring and still is doing things in broadcasting and other ventures where he's really, it's been an amazing story of someone who grew up as the fifth of seven kids with nothing and really made something big out of his life. But there is some news out of college football, and I don't know if you can fully get your head around this or not, but they have made some changes for the playoff as they head into this 12-team college football playoff next year. And it's a little bit hard to follow, but you get the idea that they want to make sure that you don't have like a Florida State from last year and that you don't have like a situation where Liberty would trump a Florida State. So let's try to unpack this the best that we can. This is from Heather Dinich's story from late last night on ESPN, and she writes, the College Football Playoff Board of Managers unanimously approved a model that will guarantee the 5 highest-ranked conference champions inclusion in the expanded 12-team field this fall. Now, as we know, the Pac-12 is done. There's 2 teams left. So, you can't really, both those teams, Oregon State and Oregon, they have bad years. What are you going to do? The vote had to be unanimous for the 5+7 format to be approved, and the Pac-12 had either previously abstained or asked for a delay as it worked on determining its future following sweeping conference realignment. It's not realignment, it's abandonment. Everybody has left the conference. Washington State President Kirk Schultz, who represents the Pac-12, told ESPN last week that he would confer with Oregon State. Did I say Oregon? It's Washington State and Oregon State that are left. Get ready to vote. Neither school can qualify for an automatic bid as a conference champion in each of the next 2 seasons, so Schultz conceded the 7 at-large bids would be more beneficial to them. So one of the 2 remaining teams on the desert island, if they have a good enough record, they can get in. In most years, she writes, the 5+7 format will assure the conference champions from the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the ACC, along with the highest rank group of 5 conference champion. You have to win the conference championship from any of those other places. So, obviously, if both Georgia and Alabama have like 1-loss seasons, they're going to get in. But in 2021, for example, when undefeated number 4 Cincinnati was the American Athletic Conference champion, ACC champion Pitt finished at number 12 with 2 losses. In the 12-team format, the 4 highest-ranked conference champions will receive a first-round bye, and that's all part of it. Scott Van Pelt, very much into college football, and his partner is Stanford Steve, named Stanford Steve because he was a football player at Stanford, pretty good one, a tight end for them, and he's worked with Scott for a long time. So as this news broke last night, just in time for their show, which starts at midnight, they unpacked it, and the reaction from the two of them was very positive.
This is awesome, I think, because it now gives us an idea of what this is going to look like from a calendar standpoint. And what we're looking at, I think that's the most exciting piece of this, is the 20th and the 21st of December. It's a Friday and a Saturday. You have 4 on-campus playoff games go.
That calendar is chock full, but think about it, Scott. When you think about on-campus, what we've always wanted, Penn State people probably getting a whiteout, Auburn people maybe getting people down on the plains for War Eagle. Just everything you possibly want on a college campus. You talk to people with these universities. They even talk about making adjustments to make sure their surface is ready because they've got to be ready for cold weather. Right. All things like that, but the college campus, that's what we've wanted. That's what I think a lot of these teams have wanted to earn.
Sure. Now, I know you want to be a little bit greedy. Like, this is good. What did you want?
Oh, I wanted the quarterfinals on campus, but I get it. Our tie-ins to the bowls, it's good. This is better than the other option.
The tie-ins to the biggest bowls are never going to die for a million different reasons. But I think it's interesting to point out there was curiosity, real concern maybe, that conference championship games might now lose their importance. Absolutely not. Because if you're in one of these big boy conferences and you win that, you're guaranteed a bye. And how many days might that get you?
Well, probably buys you 11 days and not getting that home game. But 11 days at that point in the season, there's going to be plenty at stake in those conference championship games.
And again, just looking at that calendar and where it starts on campus, and then you've got the NFL playoffs, which take over in the middle, and then you get almost like a Super Bowl kind of a bye in between the semis and then the national championship game on the 20th. Now, we thought, let's show people a bracket because people like them, especially visual learners like myself. We're going to use last year's rankings and explain why you will not see Liberty. You remember last year they were the 6th highest ranked conference champion, but that's because there were 6 conferences, right? You had the Pac-12, which existed. Now there's only 4 power conferences. Liberty could still earn the 5th conference championship bid, but last year they weren't ranked high enough to get it. Florida State would have. So I get that it's a tad convoluted, as are the fact that we're going to show you a graphic with some teams who won conferences who are going to be in the same conference. But here's a graphic.
Bang!
What would it look like based loosely on what last year is? How about Missouri going to Autzen? How about OU going down to Florida State?
How about it all? All of it. Look how good that looks.
Agreed. And I just thinking about graphics and fight songs and fan bases, and you could say, well, wait, that Penn State-Ohio State game, that was a defensive struggle. It wasn't an offensive showcase. Would they run that back? Yes. They're not going to move teams around. It's not like the brackets in the NCAA tournament where they protect anybody against anybody. Yeah. If it's Penn State-Ohio State, run it back. Run it back in Columbus and Ole Miss, Georgia. Obviously, that would be an SEC battle that you could see again.
Unbelievable.
But just imagine, again, that Friday and then the Saturday tripleheader on campus. Huh?
Yeah. Everything. We'll get you out of the studio, get you one of those games.
Yeah?
Yeah.
If you're listening to that, you're saying, Andy, you idiot, why are you running audio of them talking about a video? I understand that. You can't see it. I just wanted you to get the picture of them reacting to what looks somewhat similar to a bracket for the NCAA tournament. Now, we're only talking about 12 teams. We're not talking about 68 for basketball. But these matchups and matchups on campus, it could create some excitement. And think of the football coma that you're going to go into, where you have these games on Friday, you have these games on Saturday, and then the NFL playoffs mixed in there. I mean, it's going to be just nonstop football throughout the weekend. Will it water it down? You can only watch so much, but between the NFL and what college football gets, I mean, it is heaven for the networks. That's what they want. As I've said, the average rating for the 5 World Series games that were played this year, 9.1 million people. An NFL game, we've had them like on Thanksgiving where you're talking about 50 million people watching. And so there's just no comparison. So they're going to give us football. We like to watch football on TV. We're going to have a lot of football on television. Going to shift over to basketball here. And we've got tonight, St. John's is coming in to play Georgetown. Now, throughout the year, I've been fascinated by the Ed Cooley news conferences from Georgetown. He doesn't shy away from criticism of his team, but whenever he does criticize the team, he says it's on him. And mainly he criticizes effort. He doesn't criticize skill. Rick Pitino, after his team blew a 19-point lead against Seton Hall on Sunday, was personally attacking players and their ability and, didn't back away from it. He was asked about it yesterday or Monday by Newsday, and he said he stands by what he said. But this is some of what he said after their loss on Sunday.
We are so non-athletic that we can't guard anybody without fouling, and really it's not about losing. Because even in winning, when we watch the film, I see unathletic plays. I see people that don't handle the ball, that's just interested in taking quick shots. So it's been a disappointing year.
If you had to do it over again, would you have attacked your first offseason differently?
I had no choice. We just could take who we could get, who was available. We had no choice. I don't think we were going to win the first year anyway, because when you rush like that and you don't see the players and you just not a whole lot we can do. But it's I think I've enjoyed even the Celtics when we lost. I've enjoyed every minute being the Boston Celtic coach. Didn't like the fact that we lost in that following year, but this has been the most unenjoyable experience I've had since I've been coaching.
You have any second thoughts of taking this job?
No, not at all. It's not St. John's. It's my team. Look, I'm disappointed. I don't want to say the wrong things, but I'm really disappointed in my team.
Well, he did say the wrong things, and this is what Tony and Mike said about what he said last night on PTI.
So I saw the clip the other day, and I had to tell you, I was stunned. I mean, he said his team was no good. He said they weren't tough. They weren't athletes. They had no particular skills. He named names when he did this. I mean, you just recoil and you go, why is he doing this? Mike, these are his recruits. He brought in 11 players. They're on his watch. They're not somebody else's players. I got this great text from somebody who said, tell Pitino Louis Carnesecca's not walking through that door. I mean, this is his first year at St. John's.
That's a good line.
I'll bet there are a lot of people who hope it's his last year at St. John's. I can't defend this in any way. I know he tried to walk it back, and I think he said something like, I wasn't ripping anybody. I had an even tone, a monotone. He made it sound like a teaching moment. But Mike, if I'm a player for him, I'm going on the internet to find the phone number of the transfer portal. There's going to be all new players there next year. I hope Pitino likes it.
But, that's probably what he wants, which would be a bad thing, too. Tony, you can't do that now. This is not the 1970s with Bob Knight. Because everything Bob Knight did then, he couldn't do any one of those things now. And Pitino went on this rant, which you can't have. I mean, I talked about Adam Silver and being accountable at the top of the pyramid. Pitino, this is your program. Rick Pitino's been a great, great, great coach for a long time. And Tony, you know what this reminded me of? And there's nothing physical involved. There isn't. But this seemed like a lead up to a Woody Hayes moment, where a great, great coach goes out because he went too far and because somebody wasn't there to pull him back and say, hold on, Sparky, you can't do this. I mean, you would tone that down even in your film session this day and age. And so for Pitino to do this publicly, man, it's inexcusable.
You like Pitino and I like Pitino.
Yes.
I cannot defend this.
Nope.
I cannot defend it. on any level. I really can't.
The Woody Hayes analogy from Wilbon, I think, is a little bit much if you're too young to remember this. The last act by Woody Hayes is coach of Ohio State. They were playing in a bowl game, might have been the Gator Bowl, and they were playing Clemson. And a linebacker for Clemson intercepted a pass, Charlie Bauman, and went out of bounds on the Ohio State sidelines. And Woody punched him. Now, he wasn't going to hurt him because the Bauman was wearing a helmet. But that was caught on national TV. Keith Jackson, by the way, and whoever he was working with, but they didn't really say much about it. But the next day, Woody Hayes was fired. I mean, this is not Pitino punching a player, but these are things that you can't say. You can't name players. You can't say they're not athletic. You brought them in there, and then to say, well, we had to take who we could. No, you chased away everybody who was there. You told them to get out, Deion style, and you brought in a whole new team, which is what you're going to do again next year. But at 71 and at St. John's, not Louisville, St. John's, it's a different place to go to school. When they've been good, they benefited from New York City guys staying home. Chris Mullen, Walter Berry, guys like that. And when Louis Carnesecca was the coach and the Big East was at the top of the mountain. The Big East is not at the top of the mountain anymore. And when you go to St. John's, it's really like a commuter school. I don't even think they have dorms there. And it used to be the only school in the country that could pay its players because they used to pay them for housing. Well, now they just pay them NIL money, so, whatever they're making through that. But for a guy like Chris Mullen, that worked out pretty well because he lived at home while he went to school. He's from Brooklyn. But it's a different era now, and Rick Pitino is 71 years old. He's not coaching at Louisville anymore. He's not surprising people at Iona like he did the last few years, playing against mostly lower-level competition, not Big East competition. So tonight, with the great Ed Cooley post-game news conferences and with what Pitino dropped on Sunday, never mind the game between St. John's and Georgetown tonight. Let's go right to the news conferences. Let's just skip the game and have Pitino and Cooley talk to the media. So I'm really looking forward to that tonight. And if it's any juicy stuff, I'll play the highlights for you tomorrow. Coming up, Sugar Ray Leonard, one of the great boxing champions of all time, lost only 3 fights during his 40-fight career. 3 losses, 1 draw, 36 wins, 25 knockouts for a guy whose plan was that he was going to win an Olympic gold medal, go to the University of Maryland, and live the rest of his life kind of anonymously. Didn't work out that way. We'll get to his story as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We got Tony coming up at 11 o'clock today. Also in the next hour, Jay Billis, who was on with Rich Eisen yesterday, lays out a scenario where pay for play is coming in college athletics. And you'll want to listen to that because he's a lawyer. He understands the legal ramifications, and there's a big court case coming on this, which could be a game changer. We'll get to that in the next hour. Meantime, I continue to roll out these terrific interviews that have recently surfaced on YouTube, done by Dan Patrick and Joe Buck. This one, Joe Buck, talking to the one and only Sugar Ray Leonard, who grew up in Palmer Park, Maryland, won a gold medal at the 76 Games, said he wasn't going to be a professional fighter, and wound up having 40 professional fights and fighting until he was 41 years old. So sometimes plans change. But growing up as the 5th of 7 kids in Palmer Park, although he became a world-class athlete, as a kid, it was really boxing or bust.
I didn't qualify to play football because I thought it was too dangerous. I thought that baseball was too dangerous. I didn't basketball, no one picked me anyway, so that was dangerous. But my life, I look back in retrospect, I had an incredible life without those major sports because I felt inferior. Boxing became a sport that I saw or found out that I could do, and when I was taken first to the gym, I put those gloves on. And Joe, whether I found boxing found me, or we found each other, there was a magic to that introduction with gloves, the independent sport.
The first time you tried it, though, 7 years old, and you were like, no, this isn't working.
That was at number 2 boys club, a kid, 7 years old, 8 years old. I put the gloves on. The guy said, boom. I said, I'm good. That's it. I retired. So I retired, and I came back, and I was like, I was 14 years old.
And again, not to keep bringing him up, but Roger's the guy that dragged you down there.
Yes, he said, Ray, come with me to the gym. And I said, why? But it was a marriage made in heaven. It was a relationship. And I said, you know what? I said, I'm not that good, I'm not that great, but I'm gonna train harder than everyone. I'm gonna run further than everyone. I'm gonna hit the bags longer than everyone. I did what I could, every single time.
When you hit that bag, was it a feeling unlike you ever had before when you were working a speed bag or hitting the heavy bag? Or what was that like? What hooked you in?
Hitting that big bag, boom, 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 because I was thinking about my brother Roger. I always want to beat him.
And he could fight too, by the way.
Oh, he could fight. He was better than I was. That's why I was hitting the bag. And I was boom, 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 boom. It just released anxieties. It released all the tension, all the, it was just a release for me.
To the point where you were running to school to get your road work in.
The kids thought I was crazy. I was running to school, and this is like, I was in like 9th grade, 8th, 9th grade, and I would run behind the school bus, and they said, that kid is crazy, you know? And I get to school, change clothes, and run back sometimes, because I was that determined. I mean, at that age, 13, 14, 15, I was so dedicated. I was so focused, because I wanted to be somebody. I didn't necessarily say I wanted to be champion. I didn't want to say I want to be a boxing champion, but I wanted to be something special. And I worked hard for it.
You wanted to stand out, right? In your family, not in a bad way, but you wanted to accomplish.
I want to accomplish, yeah, Joe. I want to accomplish. I don't know. I don't really know. I try to look back on what I meant by special. You know, I'm looking, I'm still searching to a degree. I just didn't want to be ordinary.
Well, he wasn't, because by the time he's 16 years old, it's only a few years after resuming training for boxing, which he had run away from when he was a little kid, he's getting a tryout for the Olympic Games, and he's actually underage, lies about his age, and gets a tryout and nearly made it to Munich in 1972.
It was the Olympics that said, that's what I want. And I tried to qualify for the 1972 Olympics. I was 16, and I told them I was 17.
So you lied about your age?
A little bit, but but the kids were so experienced, far more experienced than me, and I lost in the quarterfinals of the trials, Olympic trials in 1972. And I remember vividly in the dressing room crying, because I could have made the Olympic team. And a coach came in there and said, sugar man. He said, don't worry, 1976 you'll be more experienced. 1976 you will win. And I took that to heart. I took it to heart.
So you're getting this experience in the ring, and I know you had a lot going on in your life outside the ring. People are taking advantage of a young Ray Leonard.
Well, the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me was that I was sexually abused by a coach, Olympic coach, because that guy was who I looked up to, who I trusted. That guy was my way to the Olympics, I thought. And he took advantage of that. And he did something to me that I kept in my heart. Something that I kept so long hidden from the world. I never told my mother or father, I never told my brothers or sisters, I never told my girlfriend, and I didn't come back with until, I think it was 2011, I wrote a book. And it was cathartic. I mean, for me to talk about what happened to me, for a man, a young man, a famous person, a boxer, a champion, all those things told me I couldn't talk about this. This was voodoo, this was no good. But the more I talked about it, the better I felt. even to this day, I'm not ashamed of what happened. I'm sorry it did happen, but I've been able to help other people.
So that off of that horrible experience, Sugar Ray gets back to training, and in 1976, he makes the Olympic team, and he wins the gold medal, and this is when most of us first became aware of him, because you don't really follow boxing at the lower levels once the Olympics happen. And he's not just a local story. He's a really cool national story because he's told people, this is it. I'm not going to be a professional fighter. I'm going to the University of Maryland. I'm going to live out my life. My goal is not to be a professional boxer. And at the time, I don't think he was married, but he and his girlfriend, who he later married, Juanita, had a little boy. And his name is also Ray, and he had put a picture of him on his sock, as I remember, as he was competing in the Olympics. He had taped it to his sock, and so that caught the attention of a lot of people. And Sugar Ray Leonard became this huge national story as part of the 1976 Olympics in Montreal, and of course that's where he wins the gold medal. And this is the story of that as he tells it to Joe Buck.
Nothing compares to the Olympic gold medal. Nothing.
No championship. No,
because they represent something totally different. For me, for the Olympics, that wasn't about money or fame. That was about representing myself and my country, and being the best in the amateur field. That was so special to me.
You get that opportunity, and we're going to show a portion of the gold medal match. Let's take a look.
Tactical boxing exhibition by Ray Leonard of Palmer Park, Maryland, and the Cuban is hurt again. He is hurt again. Leonard is now battering. Oh, that Cuban fighter is now in desperate trouble. Now the standing 8 count. Ray Leonard with a right lead and then a left. Cleaning up. The Cuban is ready to go. The referee stops the contest. Ray Leonard of Palmer Park, Maryland, will go to the University of Maryland now. His dream is realized as he has won himself a gold medal.
God, that's powerful.
That was... It's one of the most cherished moments, ideal moments, significant moments in my life. It wasn't easy because although Saddam from Cuba had annihilated everybody, and the general consensus felt that I had no way of winning, but it was heart. It was heart and speed.
Well, to think of just to that point, where you came from, and here you are just wailing away, winning a gold medal for your country. And after that, it was kind of like, okay, I did it. I won the gold medal, and now I want to go to college. Correct?
That's correct. When I stood on that pedestal and the national anthem was being played and the gold medal was placed around my neck, it was kind of bittersweet because I was so excited to have won the gold medal, but I knew it was over. I knew that this would be my last fight, and I was going to go to the University of Maryland, further my education, get a great job, and continue. Got home, and my father had went to a coma. Everyone's crying. I'm crying, and the family was an emotional mess. And we had no money. I asked for my mentor, Jenks Morton. I said, Jenks, how can I make fast money? He said, turn pro and you make fast money. And that was the last thing on my mind, to turn pro, because I didn't want to be like one of the other boxers, great champions, who made so much money, but at the end of the day had nothing to show for it. I didn't want to be that way. For me, I did it for my father.
That was part of it, and that's certainly a big part of it. But also, as Ray reveals in this interview, and I remember from the time, he thought that the fame that he had from the Olympics would be enough to support him very well for the rest of his life with endorsements. The only guy who really was able to do that was Mike Eruzione, who was the captain of the Miracle on Ice team. That people still gravitate to him all these years later, and he's made a fortune doing public speaking and endorsements and things like that. But also from that 76 Olympics, Bruce Jenner got all the things that Sugar Ray wanted, including the Wheaties box. So he dined out off endorsements for a long time. There just wasn't enough for him to live the way he wanted to live. So he decided, okay, I'm going to take up professional fighting. And it's part of his entree into professional boxing. He has a meeting that's set up with Muhammad Ali. And here's the story of that.
Muhammad Ali, my idol, my friend, he said to me, he said, Ray, if you ever turn pro, he says, make sure you sign your own checks. He says, and make sure you take care of yourself from a business perspective. And also make sure you take Angelo Dundee with you, his trainer. He said he has the right connection and the right complexion. I mean, but
that's just a sliver of the brilliance of that guy.
Oh, yeah, it was.
And then you meet this guy, Mike Trainer.
Mike Trainer.
Who, if there's one guy, as I read your bio, that really set you up to be this great industry, which is this one-man gang of just promotion, and here's the man who sets up your business in a way that is in line with what Ali told you.
Well, I told Mike Trainer, I said, Mike, I don't want to turn pro. I want to be on the Wheaties box. He said, the chances are better if you fight. And I said, I don't want to be owned by anyone. I want to be my own man. He said, how much do you believe in yourself? I said, 100%. So he put together 30 people. They each loaned me at $1,000. I paid them off my first professional fight, plus interest, and it became incorporated.
And as you're walking out of the ring, everybody who ponied up the $1,000 for Ray Leonard got their money back.
Yep. I did that. I turned professional. My father regained his health probably in about 6 months to a year. And I said to myself, this is not a bad job. And I kept going.
Yeah, and he did. And he really peaked in the early 80s. The year 1980 is really significant, probably his most famous year of boxing. But he also suffers his first loss in that year, and he loses to Roberto Duran. But quickly, there's a rematch set up, and the rematch is what everybody remembers. The rematch taking place in 1980, and in the first fight, Sugar Ray learned that he couldn't fight the style that he was fighting. So by the time the second fight rolls around, he's ready. And as we find out, Duran isn't ready for that style. And to this day, what are we talking, 44 years later, we still don't really know what caused Roberto Duran to go no mas, or at least throw up his hands. And he was heard saying no mas. But that is the fight that everybody remembers. And Duran was a great champion. He really was. But I think that's what people remember him most for. So this is Sugar Ray's recollection of the famed no mas fight with what happened in 1980.
Things were so different. It was night and day from the first fight to the second fight. The first fight, I was stationary against the ropes in the corners, and he was able to take advantage of that. This fight here, Duran was like a bully. I hate to say it, but he was like a bully. And when you challenge a bully or fight him back, they do one or two things. They come back stronger, or they run away. Duran threw his hands up in frustration without realizing the ramifications it would have on his legacy.
He quit.
He quit, yeah.
He quit in the 8th round, and this is a guy who had the title. He's handing it. Now, I say that, and I know you want to reach over this thing and punch me right in the head, because what I know is stuck with you since then is, yeah, he quit. Did he say no mas? Did he not? I don't know. But he quit because you were kicking his ass. Coming out of that fight, it was all about Duran quitting in the 8th round when it gave you no credit for being the one that forced him to quit in the 8th round, right?
That's true. I mean, absolutely. But I was also being a little selfish. The fact that it wasn't about, it was why he quit, And it wasn't that I made him quit. It was like, why did he quit? I made him quit. And it bothered me for a while, a few months maybe a year. But we did a thing together, and went to Panama, and we met up again, and in the ring. And I said, Roberto, all these years later, now people want to know what happened in that ring. Only you can tell them the truth. And I was really waiting for him to say, yeah, you really frustrated me, and I threw my hands up in defeat. I was waiting to hear that. I want to hear that so bad, really, really bad. And he said, I had cramps. He said I had cramps. But then again, I saw him searching for words, and I saw tears in his eyes, and I backed away. I said, you know what, Durant, Roberto, it's okay. It's okay.
The cramp theory, there are people who back that, and this is what I've heard regarding this. Durant, and you could see it if you've ever seen pictures of him between fights, he would blow up. His weight would go way high between fights, and then when he'd start training, he'd bring his weight down. Well, as he got older, it was tougher and tougher to bring his weight down in a hurry, and so he's sweating it out to get to the weight for this rematch in 1980, and he's not quite there, so he pretty much has to sweat it out and starve it out and all that, and he gets on the scale, makes weight, so the fight is going to take place, and then the way it works is you weigh in the day before, and then the fight is the next night. Well, in between, you're allowed to eat. You're allowed to get your strength back up. So he, as I've been told, ate an enormous steak and drank a quart of grapefruit juice. And what happened when he got in the ring, when anybody would down that kind of food and high acid with the grapefruit juice and the whole thing, that he did cramp up, and he was afraid that he was going to have an accident in his boxing trunks, and he didn't want to do that in the ring. So that's why he allegedly quit. We probably will never know the full story, but Sugar Ray's side of it is, and he was winning the fight, is that Duran quit. He just absolutely quit. Now, that wasn't his style. He was a hell of a champion, and he had a great long career, but that is what people remember, the No Mas fight. I wasn't there, but a friend of mine had gone to the closed circuit broadcast in San Antonio. If you don't remember, closed circuit was prior to pay-per-view. People didn't have cable, or very few people had cable in 1980, so either in a movie theater or some kind of convention center, they would show the fight, and you'd go in and watch it just as you were watching a movie. And he was there, and he said they had a lot of folding chairs there, and the San Antonio had high Hispanic population. They were rooting for Duran, and when he quit, they started throwing chairs and stuff. People were just really upset about the whole thing, and it's one of the more memorable fights in history. Also, we had the famous fight with Marvin Hagler, and to this day, people swear Marvin Hagler won the fight, but the build-up to that was enormous. They fought in 1986, and he kept on fighting all the way until 1997, when finally Hector Macho Camacho, at the age when Sugar Ray was 41, convinced him, this isn't a good idea for you to continue fighting. So that was his last fight. But there were 40 professional fights in all. He won 36 of them, 25 by knockout, and had the 3 losses plus 1 draw. A great career, and he continues to do great things in broadcasting and other ventures. Still looks great. I mean, this interview was done a few years ago, but if you see him now, he's in his late 60s. He looks like he's like 40 years old. I mean, just a really a guy who has taken really good care of himself. Coming up, Davey Martinez talking about base running and other things as spring training continues in West Palm. We'll get to that and more. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Should the Commanders trade the number 2 pick, Mike Tannenbaum, former GM with the Jets and the Dolphins, now with ESPN, says yes, and he's got a trade in mind with the Raiders. We'll get to that coming up at 10 o'clock. Meantime, the Nationals have everybody at spring training. They're off and running, and Mark Lerner has said to the Washington Post, we're not selling. He says, we're very happy owning the team and bringing us back a ring one day. So Barry's Verluga's got a column about this in the Post today. And remember, when the Lerners announced they were exploring options to sell the team 2 years ago, Barry wrote, don't believe options. They're selling. That's it. This is going to happen. And 2 years later, it hasn't happened. And now Mark Lerner is saying that they are selling or keeping the team. They're not going to sell the team. And what Barry writes today in his column, he says, does bringing back that ring mean the Nationals will develop the young core they have in-house and build around it with veteran free agents? You know, the kind that cost not $5 million for one season, but hundreds of millions for several, or will they hang on to it and draft and develop? That's absolutely the way to start a build. It's not the way to complete it. The Nationals have a critical mass of potentially impactful prospect. The key word is potentially. They are not all going to succeed. At some point, outside reinforcements will be necessary. Keep in mind, though, that the Lerner family oversaw the first build, the one that led to 4 National League East titles, a wild card appearance in an 8-year span. Does credit for that go to General Manager Mike Rizzo and his staff for drafting and developing Bryce Harper, Steven Strasburg, Anthony Rendon, Jordan Zimmerman, and others to add to the incumbent pieces, Ryan Zimmerman and Ian Desmond? Sure, but the Lerners made a financial commitment, too, where they landed Jason Worth as the player who delivered the vision that the Nats laid out. They paid Max Scherzer $210 million over 7 years at the time, the richest contract ever given to a free agent pitcher, a deal that became one of the best signings in the history of the sport. So are they willing to do those things again? And the price tag off what we saw from Shohei Ohtani at $700 million, it ain't $210 million anymore. So you got to be financially all in these days. And what Barry writes about the sale that didn't happen, he says the Lerners had a price in mind. Think $1 more than the roughly $2.4 billion Steve Cohen paid for the Mets in 2020 and didn't get it. Previous reporting by the Post revealed that Ted Leonsis, who owns the Capitals and the Wizards, bid more than $2 billion. That apparently was not enough. So this is what we've also heard about the Lerners is they set a price, they don't bargain. And they didn't get their price, team hasn't been sold. So at least there is some certainty now about ownership, or apparently a certainty, because we had the Angelos family saying last year, oh, no, we're not going to sell the team. And now they've sold the team to David Rubenstein. So it could still happen, but Mark Lerner is saying their intentions are to keep the team and to go after another ring. Meantime, what's there in spring training? This is far from a contending team, but it's a developmental team. You got some young players. And in an era where we talk all about the 3-run homer, you know, the old Earl Weaver way of winning, which was, I guess, ahead of its time. Now that's all that teams seem to do. Here's Davey Martinez yesterday talking to the media about how much he's stressing base running.
You don't have to be really fast to run the base as well. You know, going first to third, scoring on a base hit, tagging, all those other things, reading dirt balls. You know, I was here with Zim, and Zim was a really good base runner, you know, and I use him as an example today about, hey, you don't have to be fast to be a good base runner. You just got to understand what you're trying to do. And for me, we're trying to get to third base with less than 2 outs. There's so many ways that we could score from third base. So we're going to push the envelope. I want these guys to be aggressive, especially in spring training. And I want to see how far they could push it. So, but it all starts with understanding, you know, situations in the game, where you're at, secondary leads, you know, understanding, you know, when we can run and we cannot run, all that stuff. So we're going to go over that stuff every day. It's part of our fundamental, and it's very important to me, and it should be important to the players as well.
I like the excitement of going for the extra base. Just anecdotally, I don't know how well it's worked out over the years. I'm sure he's a fine fellow, but I'm glad that Bob Henley is not coaching third base anymore. He was sending guys all the time, and he was sending Ryan Zimmerman. I mean, Zimmerman may have been a very smart base runner, but he wasn't fast at all, and he was sending him to the plate in situations where you get thrown out by 5 feet. So, you want to have an aggressive team, but in this era of baseball where the big bop is so valued, do you want to get runners thrown out trying to get the extra base? On the pitching side, you know, as this team has turned over and the Scherzers retire and things like that, what do you do about developing young pitchers? Right now, a lot of hopes riding on Josiah Gray, who did make the All-Star game last year but fell off, and now he's back for another spring training and getting the encouragement from his manager, Davey Martinez.
I'm hoping that he understands that, you know, coming in this spring, who he is and what makes him really good. And I'm hoping that, you know, by talking to him, that a lot of the tinkering is going to go away this year. I think he learned a lot about himself. He was an all-star last year, right? I mean, he had an unbelievable first half. Second half was a little bit different, but I think he saw both sides of the spectrum, what he can be, what he should be, versus what he doesn't want to be. So I think that's definitely going to help him here moving forward. He's come to spring training with a plan. He really has, and we're going to make sure that he sticks to that plan. But I watched him throw today, and his mechanics were clean. He looked really good, and he wants to develop. I know he wants to throw, all these pitches, but he really wants to develop 3 or 4. But more so than anything, understand that he can throw a fastball for strikes. And that's been the downfall, when he gets in trouble. But he knows he's got to be able to pound his own with his fastball.
All right, so we'll keep an eye on Josiah Gray this year, who they hope will be the ace of the staff and maybe all-star worthy again next year. Meantime, we got the sad story of Mike Sellers. Remember Mike Sellers played for the then Redskins 1998 to 2011 with a year in Cleveland in 2001. So of those years, he spent only 1 year away, played 174 games, and it's kind of obsolete in the NFL. Very few teams use him now, but he played fullback. He was like 6'4", like 250, and he was the guy that barreled into the linemen to open things up for guys like Clinton Portis. And now he is suffering some pretty serious health problems. His wife put out a GoFundMe page and talked about, what he's like as a dad to their kids. They have kids 13, 14, and another one she describes as a young adult. She says, my husband is currently the running backs coach for one of the best high schools in the nation. For the past 6 months, Mike has been in and out of the best hospital in the nation at Tampa General Hospital, and has been able to help the football program along the way, but has recently received 9 heart treatments, and he's no longer able to provide for his family. He still needs a couple more treatments. He's in the hospital, and the fundraiser is to support the family for the rest of 2024 because she's had to take a leave from her job as what she says is a paraprofessional at the local high school in Florida, and they need some money. This is just another example of what the NFL really needs to get their arms around. These guys pay a tremendous price with their body, and you've got to be able to give them lifetime health benefits. I think that's a small thing for former football players. Maybe it's, you got to play 5 years in the NFL. Here's a guy who played a long, long time, 1998 to 2011. He also played in Canada. He was playing professional football in Canada when he was 19 years old. So he played a long time, and it probably took this tremendous toll on his body. Who knows? You can't 100% say for sure if the heart situation is related to playing, but I would pretty much bet that that's the case with the pounding that they take. And the wife should not have to have a GoFundMe page. The NFL should take care of people like this. There's just so much money going out there. And yes, there are minimum salaries. It's probably maybe still less than $1 million. And if you look at the total number of players who play football, it's only the best of the best that are getting these quarterback contracts of $50 million a year. But there's so much money coming into the league. The money is just gushing in. I mean, just one little anecdote, the Super Bowl, by going into overtime, it earned another $60 million in advertising. You tell me you can't help out a guy like Mike Sellers? The league can't take care of him? His wife has to go begging for money on a GoFundMe page? Really? I mean, this is just not right. And if the players are going to pay this kind of price with their lives, which is what they're doing, then the league, the least they ought to do is take care of them. Make sure that you don't have a situation like this where the wife, who's an earner, can't make money now. She's had to take leave of her job to help take care of the family, and the husband, who played all these years in the NFL, is incapable of doing anything right now and needs care. And I don't know what their health insurance situation is, I don't know if he's as a part-time coach at this local high school, if he gets benefits. This is wrong. It's just wrong, and the league needs to do something about it. Coming up in the next hour, this proposed trade by Mike Tannenbaum with the Commanders dealing the number 2 pick. We'll pick that apart as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. All righty, we got a Tony Show coming up today at 11 o'clock. Later this hour, we'll look back 35 years ago today, where Pete Rose visited the short-term commissioner, Peter Ueberroth, who was ending his brief term as commissioner, about to turn it over to Bart Giamatti, and they started asking questions about gambling allegations and how things ramped up from there, and how 35 years later that is still a thing. Should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame? All the twists and turns that have included the steroid era and everything, and now, jumping in bed with gambling, that's another aspect of this. It's a story that never ends. It just keeps going and going and going, and it all started 35 years ago today. Before we get to this proposed trade from Mike Tannenbaum, former general manager of the Jets and Dolphins, now an analyst with ESPN, he's got a suggestion for the Commanders for the number 2 pick. Now, he's also suggesting, and he's getting ridiculed for this, that when Russell Wilson is cut by the Broncos, and it's going to happen in like 2 weeks, because if he's still on the roster 3 days into the new league year, which starts, I believe, March 1st, they're on the hook for him for 2025 as well. So they're going to have to eat like $35 million, $39 million, whatever it is, for next year. They'll cut him, and whoever picks him up will pay the minimum, and the Broncos will pay the rest, and it'll be on their cap and everything else. But to get him off for 2025, they're going to have to release him, and Tannenbaum says the Jets should claim him. He's going to be the backup to Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, sure. That'll work out really well, because in his mind, even though he hasn't played like it in years, Russell Wilson thinks he's Aaron Rodgers. That doesn't usually work out well in a backup quarterback situation. And we'll get to more on that. Meantime, I was thinking about this today. My hockey knowledge is limited. I'll give you that. And really, the only time I pay close attention to hockey is when the Caps are in the playoffs. I watch their playoff games. Playoff games are great. They're fun. And I like to go to games. It's great to be there, great atmosphere. They have had a tough year. They're probably not going to make the playoffs. They're not out of it yet. They're 6 points out, and they have, I think, 27 games left to go. They're playing a tough team on the road tomorrow at Tampa, but they've won a couple of games recently. And this headline in the actual newspaper, which I still get, maybe the headline's online as well, but the headline of the Post on Bailey Johnson's story is, "New tech is getting results as Capitals roll. Crashing the net pays off with second straight win." Again, they played 54 games. I'm not a hockey expert, but it seems to me that if you have a coaching staff that watches intently every play, goes over it on tape after the game, you have analytics people who analyze every little thing. It took you 50 games plus to realize that you should crash the net? Really? I mean, when we get into playoff hockey, a lot of people like me who aren't necessarily hockey people will say, oh, yeah, you got to have a lot of traffic around the net. It sounds like you know what the hell you're talking about. But why did it take so long to have them realize that, yeah, crashing the net is a pretty good idea? And Alex Ovechkin, who was doing nothing through the season, has gotten hot now. He had 2 more goals last night. He's got 8 in the last 8 games. He's on track for 24 this year. He's still a ways away from Wayne Gretzky. He needs 56 to tie him. So even if he gets to 24 this year, which would be another 8 more, so would it be 48 and 49 to pass? He's not going to get 49 next year. So we're looking at 2 more years after this for him to break the record. And he says, when his contract's up with the Caps, he'll retire. So that's probably going to be it. That's probably what he's gearing up for, to break the record, and then he'll be done. So it's probably 2 more seasons after this. But again, for someone who's a hockey know-nothing, to read a headline that says, new tack is getting results as Caps roll, crashing the net pays off with second straight win. Why weren't they crashing the net in November? Why do we have to wait until late February for this realization, hey, crashing the net, probably a good idea? Joe Gibbs came in here in 1981 with the Air Coryell offense, throwing it all over the place. They led the league in offense through the first 5 games, and they were 0-5. And then he said, this is probably not a good thing for the personnel I have here. So let's have a running offense. Let's grind it out. Let's bring in an extra tight end, which we'll call the H-back. And the rest, of course, is history. I know hockey's different. And you could say you're an idiot, Andy. You don't know anything about hockey. If you do something, you wouldn't be saying this. But this is just, on glance that the team has played well recently, and the goal of getting Alex Ovechkin is now working. He's getting goals, 2 more last night, 16 on the year, and 8 in the last 8 games. It would just seem like maybe this was the way that they should have been playing all along. All right, off to the football. And this was Mike Tannenbaum yesterday on ESPN with this suggestion for the Commanders with the number 2 pick.
Okay, Las Vegas Raiders, they're going to need a quarterback. They're cutting Jimmy G, so they have to get up. So in this trade, they're going all the way up to number 2. That's going to cost a lot. That's going to cost this year's first-round pick. It's going to cost them a second-round pick, next year's one, and a really good young player in Michael Mayer. Now, if you're Washington, boy, now you're really recouping on the fly. You have Sam Howell. You still have a chance of getting maybe J.J. McCarthy. I think this is a real win-win for both teams.
What do you think of this one, Jeff? I think the Commanders just have to know what they're going to do at quarterback. I like the idea of building picks, but they're in this coveted number 2 spot where they can get a franchise guy if they they can either move up to 1 or get him at 2. But I just think that they got to come out of this draft, in my opinion, with one of those big 3 quarterbacks.
Harry, do you agree the Commanders need a quarterback with one of those 2 picks?
Yeah, we also got to remember, this is a new ownership group with the Josh Harris group, and they're trying to change a lot of things and reset things amongst that franchise. So I think a franchise quarterback will be a big need and something that also the city and the area needs as well.
I tend to side with Harry Douglas on that, a former player in the NFL, now an analyst with them. Jeff Darlington, a reporter, I think he's based down in Miami. They both are giving pushback on Tannenbaum on this. I know it's hard to follow, so let me recap what he's suggesting here. So Washington would trade the number 2 pick to Las Vegas. They would get the Raiders' first-round pick this year, which is 13, and that's where Tannenbaum says they can land J.J. McCarthy. They would also get a second-round pick this year. They've got a lot of picks in the upper half of the draft, so this would add to that and would give them more leverage if they want to move back up after they would trade down. And then they would get next year's first-round pick, the first-round pick in 2025, plus tight end Michael Mayer. They do need a tight end for sure, and this is a young one. He was drafted in the 2nd round this past year from Notre Dame. He had 27 catches and 2 touchdowns. So you'd get a guy who could probably step right into your starting lineup at tight end. You would get maybe J.J. McCarthy, a quarterback of that level, who you could bring along with Sam Howell still starting. And then you get the extra picks, a second-rounder this year and a first-rounder next year. It's not going to happen because I think Harry Douglas is right on there that they've got to get somebody. But it's not like, it's not like it was with Snyder. Oh, we got to get somebody splashy so we can sell tickets. Yes, they're interested in selling tickets. But the big thing about being at number 2 is you hope you're not going to be there for a long, long time. And what you hope to land with the number 2 pick is a franchise quarterback, which they haven't had. Who was the last one? I guess Kirk. Kirk would have been the last franchise guy, but they botched that. They botched that entirely. And although he's never really won much in terms of postseason, he's been an excellent quarterback and should have stayed here. If they'd have played their cards right, which they never did, because they always screwed it up. But if they'd have played their cards right, Kirk Cousins is still quarterbacking here, and who knows what they've done in the time that he's been in Minnesota. But that's done. That's all over, and now they move forward. But you'll hear a lot more of these things. People with all this time to kill before the draft, like Mel Kiper says. He says, the fact that the draft is just a few months after the season gives teams all this time to think and rethink things. You used to have the draft back in January, and when they had the AFL-NFL wars in the 60s, the draft would take place in November. Yeah, because and you had like stories of AFL teams signing players under the goalposts after their bowl games were over on New Year's Day. It was a big war at the time, but now that you have all this time to think and rethink and speculate as to what's going to happen, you're going to get more suggestions about trades. But my feeling is it's either going to be Drake May or Jaden Daniels coming here. I think the way things are lining up, they're not going to trade up with the Bears. I don't think the Bears are going to get away from Caleb Williams. And frankly, I'd be a little bit nervous about Caleb Williams coming here because of the dad influence and because he's local, which I don't think is a good situation for a guy to come and play in his hometown. So that's how I look at it, and I think that this speculation is fun, and that's why I play it, but not going to happen. Some more baseball, and we discussed this yesterday. Mike Trout, on the same day that Anthony Rendon, his teammate with the Angels, said, it's not a top priority for me. Baseball, most people, sure, it's their family, but he went on to say, it's just a job here. It's just a job. Well, he's due $113 million and has played 58 games or less over the 4 years he's been with the Angels, and he's been terrible. And he's gotten into fights with fans. He's been a disaster. Whereas Mike Trout, he's the highest paid player in baseball, still produces. The problem is he doesn't get to the postseason, so nobody knows who he is. And he has watched Shohei Ohtani come and go with the Angels, signing with the Dodgers, and he's sitting there with this enormous contract, but he's not demanding a trade. He's not, the superstar level in other sports, you can get out. If you don't want to be there, you get out. And Trout, if he wanted to get out, he would, maybe make some noise about it. But by saying, it would be the easy way out to ask for a trade, and I'm not going to do that, Tony and Mike looked at this yesterday, and they I think, believe it's sort of a passive-aggressive stance.
Trout said he has no intention of asking the Angels to trade him. Trout said that would be the easy way out. He allowed that he might do that in the future, but not now. Wilbon, what do you hear in what Trout said?
Tony, resentment, disappointment, those two things overwhelmingly. Resentment that, Ohtani has gone and now signed for the largest sum of money anybody can even imagine. And he's just going to be, 60 miles up the road playing for the Dodgers, who always overshadow the Angels. And so there's that. And then there's a disappointment that he's turning 33 years old, if he's not 33 already. And Tony, I didn't even know he hasn't been in the playoffs since he was 23 years old. So he's had these great individual seasons which have added up to nothing. I mean, if he was an NBA player, he would have forced his way out by tweeting something, and he would have forced his way to a new team, which is more difficult. You can do that to a degree in baseball. We've seen guys do that in baseball as well. But, man, if you're Trout and you see what Ohtani did, he just said, enough. I don't want to be there with you. And that's what he's hearing, even if it wasn't personal. And I sort of hear it with him.
Yeah, what I hear is, I'm not going to ask for a trade, but if you want to trade me, I'm good with that. I hear public relations 101 by Mike Trout. I'm tough. I'm here. I signed. I'm not going anywhere. But nobody really believes that. He can't be happy there. Ohtani just bailed out. And how about this quote from Anthony Rendon? You got to hear this. It's a direct quote. Baseball has never been a top priority for me. It's a job. I do it to make a living. So you can really depend on him, right?
Yeah.
Listen, Mike, I think the right thing for the Angels to do right now, is trade Mike Trout. It would be good for Mike Trout. It'd be good for baseball. And if the Angels get 3 or 4 prospects that make the big leagues, it would be good for the Angels at this point. Because, Mike, within a year, Trout is going to go and say, trade me. And I say that because he never said, I don't want to be traded. He did not categorically say that.
But he called
said, I'm not going to ask for it.
When he said
There's
easy way out, he tagged it.
It's a difference.
But he put himself in a situation, in a position, Tone, to sort of, say, wait a minute, I'm tougher than that. I can take the tougher road. He did. I mean, he laid it out there.
They tried. They tried at the trade deadline. They tried when they brought in Joe Madden.
Yeah.
They tried spending money on Rendon. They tried with Ohtani. They give Trout $1 gazillion. Trade him now.
Yeah.
Trade him now.
If you can, what you might have to give up plus take on a salary for a guy who's hurt a lot. Trout Trout and a great player. I'm not saying that they have really enough around him. Maybe the front office hasn't done a good enough job building around the team. But sometimes a player is good enough to take a team on his back and lead them to the playoffs. And he's done it once in his career. He's been to the playoffs one time, and that was 10 years ago. Man, I mean, so I don't know what kind of market you're going to get for him, and the Angels aren't going to give him away. You know, yeah, Tony says prospects. Okay, if you can do that, but I'm not so sure anybody's really willing to take that on. He does have great talent, and you know, you put him in the outfield with Juan Soto with the Yankees because you know Soto is about to he's making big money now. He's probably making $30 million, you know, off the last year of his rookie deal with arbitration. And he's going to cash in next year. He may get, you know, $5, and Trout's still on the deal that's paying him $420. I don't know, you know, if they can afford that, but maybe, you know, and Aaron Judge is making a gazillion. So you put Trout in left, Judge in center, and Soto in left. Well, why not? But there aren't that many teams that are going to take on that money for a guy who gets hurt a lot. He's missed a lot of games. Yeah, he's been an MVP 3 times, although nobody knows him. Nobody sees him. The combination of not being in the postseason and playing on the West Coast where the games are so late, you don't really get a sense of him. So it's kind of like Siberia where he is. They got some attention because of Ohtani. Now, with Ohtani gone, the Angels are nowhere. They might as well be the Kansas City Royals. They're not that far, you know, in terms of payroll. They are, but they're not that far from where the A's are. And the A's are like this gypsy show. Like they've said, we're going to go play in a minor league stadium in Las Vegas, and the mayor said, no, you don't want to do that. So they're going to be in Oakland for the next, I think, 4 years, next 4 seasons before that stadium is open. And you got a lot of messes there on the West Coast. It's not all rosy here either, but you know the Lerners are hanging on to the team, and it does look. And maybe I'll spend some more time on this tomorrow. There's a big story in the Baltimore Sun the other day about the Masson deal, and there's reason to believe that's going to go away, which you know may or may not have impacted the Lerner decision to hang on to the team. But the fighting that's gone on over the money that they're due, which they won in court, and there's another round that has to go because of more money dating back to 2016, maybe that can all be resolved and they move in a different direction. The streaming thing, that's got a lot to do with it right now because we're in that transitionary period where cable is kind of dying out, but it's not dead, and then streaming is big, but it's not totally taking over. So it's a very odd time to be in TV world, but they'll work it out. Anyway, that's a wrap for me. Tony is coming up next, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.